So guys, we got to play it. We got to play the final shape a little bit early. Now understand, today's video is not going to be containing really any spoilers. We are going to be showing a lot of the exotics because during the 2 days that we got to play the final shape, we pretty much played with every single exotic. That includes the Still Hunt exotic sniper rifle with golden gun, which, by the way, just to give you a small little tip there, it does synergize with Celestial. Yes, you can get one single golden gun super shot off with it. It's quite amazing. Microcosm, we got to play with that as well. That's the exotic trace rifle, and it's a kinetic trace rifle. And we got to mess with Kvostov, Red Death, and pretty much every exotic armor piece on the Titan, Hunter, and Warlock classes. We got to play with all of those. I will be doing individual reviews of those exotics because we tested those things extensively. Today, though, I wanted to focus more on the final shape, the intro mission into the final shape, but also the big item, which is the thing that everyone's been asking. How was Prismatic? Prismatic is the new subclass that we're going to be getting in the final shape, and it is something that we didn't know we were originally going to be getting. Strand and both Stasis were things that were pitched very early on and initially. Prismatic, though, not only was it not revealed to us in the Vidoc last year, but it is doing something that Bungie has never done before. It is combining light and darkness abilities all together. Now, let me just say right out the gate, this is the most advanced class Bungie has ever given us. And it's going to take a very long time to really just wrap your head around it, because it took me, and it's still taking me, a long time to wrap my head around it. When you have access to this many different abilities, you're looking at your subclass UI and you're like, okay, I've got an arc subclass. I'm rocking a void grenade. I'm rocking a strand melee. When I slide, my abilities change because of whatever aspect, or maybe I'm charging up a trip mine, super trip mine grenade up on Hunter. You know, I've got the ability to jolt, scorch, sever, freeze. It messes with you. It messes with your head because we've been so committed to these particular lanes. Think back to when D2 first launched and we had just these little sub menus of what our subclass is. And that's where we played in. You know, you got top tree, bottom tree, and middle tree and Forsaken. And then that was it. And then eventually we rolled into the fragment aspect system, but he was still committed to one elemental type. And then within those elemental types, you would have your set of subclass verbs. What's so confusing with Prismatic is in your mind, you're like, okay, I'm rocking an arc subclass, like my super is arc, but it's not just jolt that you're going to be doing here. You have the ability to have access to ignitions and scorch, and the ability to weaken and freeze and sever. And so when I say this is an advanced class, it really just kind of comes back to the understanding of what we had before, and almost like unlearning those things and going, all right, this is how Prismatic works. And once you wrap your head around that, then you could start making headway into builds. Now, I will say initially, at least in the campaign, similar to how Strand was, and even Stasis to some aspects, you are going to be relying on Prismatic to like do damage to certain enemy types. You'll see these enemy types that have like the rainbow look, and you know, you'll have to go over there and get Transcendence to do damage against those enemies. And again, Transcendence is essentially this bar underneath your super meter bar. And as you do damage with darkness abilities and also do damage with light abilities, each one of those meters fills up. Now, if you're doing damage with a kinetic weapon, you're going to actually be splitting the amount of ability or the amount of regeneration on either side. But each one of those things fills up. And then when it fills up, you have the ability to press a button and you are now Transcendence. And in that moment, when you're Transcendence, your weapon damage goes up by 5%. Your ability increases are off the chain. Like, there's just so many abilities. You're going to get to a point, especially like in week 2, when you have access to exotic class items, where the amount of abilities you have readily available, you almost don't have enough time to put that many inputs in. There's just, especially in a Transcendence mode, there's just so much happening, man. It's almost like a mini super. It's almost like you're rocking 1.5 supers now with Transcendence. On top of that, you get access to the grenades, the Prismatic grenade, which is going to be specific to each class. And those are very potent as well. And they too dip into a variety of subclass verbs, as it's normally like a mixture of things, whether it's like suspend and jolt together, or it's like shatter damage and, you know, void damage together, you know. So there's a variety of different subclass verbs that they all rely on. And that's the thing about Prismatic. It's just understanding that you really are rocking a little bit of everything. But initially, I would say Prismatic was not that crazy to me. Like, it was like, okay, this is cool, but I'm not that blown away by it. And that's where I was like initially, and when I say initially, I'm talking about in the campaign, I was concerned that Prismatic was too much of a jack of all trades build. Here's where things really blow up. The second day we were there, we got access to exotic class items. That's the big selling point for Prismatic. Is with exotic class items, you now have the ability to merge 2 exotics into 1. Now, it's not the entire exotic. You'll be like the main benefit of that exotic, and that'll be the bold point that's within that exotic class item. But nonetheless, it's still 2 exotic class items into 1. And that is what really elevated Prismatic. So initially, when rocking Prismatic with just my normal exotics, I was like, okay, this is all right, and I'm not blown away by it. Then when I got into the full builds, when we had all the aspects unlocked, all the fragments unlocked, because they pretty much gave us the whole suite to play with in the second day, and all the exotic class items, that's whenever it was like, this is power fantasy on roids. This is why the raid is coming out 3 days after the launch of the final shape and not week 2. Had the raid come out in week 2, I'm not saying we would have walked in there and slapped the witness around, but exotic class items and a fully kitted out Prismatic subclass, you're going to be putting out some potent damage. You're going to be doing some nasty stuff. And what's so crazy is with all these different variety of different aspects and fragments and also class items, there's going to be more build variety than ever before. And we know this because we have like the build battle series. And I will say as the season goes on, all the builds kind of consolidate into like maybe 3, like 2 or 3, where everyone's just pretty much using the exact same thing. There's some people being creative, but there's obviously like your bold points, potent builds that rise to the top. Prismatic though, because of how much variety is, it's going to take us a long time to really just narrow down on like what is the most potent. Now, in terms of what I use, we tried a variety of different things. Some were more potent than others. There was one set of abilities we did, which included us rocking Dustfill grenades. We were rocking Spirit of Renewal, and that was, you know, of course, is getting a buff with the Frost Armor there. And then the other exotic that we were rocking with it was actually from the Hunter exotic helmet. So Sardarachne's Facade. So we had Spirit of Renewal and Sardarachne's Facade. That one comes where you gain Woven Mail when activating a grapple. There's been some changes there. And so the change there is just simply by using your grenade, you get Woven Mail. So if you're understanding where I'm coming with this, guys, with a single Dustfill grenade throw, you have both Woven Mail and Frost Armor. You essentially have double the resist. And so the things that you can tank with that was pretty wild. And I was just running in there and like throwing it down and essentially just letting things just beat the piss out of me just to see like what I could survive. But I'm really impressed with that. And obviously like in day 1 encounters, when you have -20 deltas, like that's going to make a big difference. Another combination we rocked was actually the Spirit of Ambient Leap, which of course takes advantage of Dringer's Lash. But we combined this with the Spirit of Khepri, and Khepri's getting a buff too. And dude, the amount of abilities I had, not even including Transcendence, was wild, because essentially, I mean, I was just popping abilities over and over, from my Consecration, from getting the Slam, from popping my Barricade, to suspending everything in front of me, from applying the Wave of Solar, going back and forth, doing the Solar and doing damage with that. Like essentially, I ran into a situation with that particular build where I was like, dude, I have so many abilities at my disposal. I don't have enough time to get all of these abilities out. That's how crazy it is. And you know what's even crazier is like the moment you pop Prismatic or Transcendence, these things amplify. So it's like you're already chewing out abilities left and right and all over the place, but then you hit Transcendence and this thing amps up even more on top of giving you a Prismatic grenade. Now, what I will say about the Prismatic grenade, that takes precedence over your base grenade. So it's not like you can use your base grenade while using, the moment you're in Transcendence, you're only using the Prismatic grenade, which you're going to want to use anyways because it's potent. But that was the experience there with Prismatic, and we'll be doing like deep dives into Prismatic this week. But just to give you an idea here, initially when the final shape launches, Prismatic is a means of getting through the campaign, kind of like Strand. Is potent, but not nearly as potent as what you were going to want it to be. But then week 2 rolls around, the episode will launch, we get access to exotic class items, and that's where things get insane. And again, like I said earlier, this is why the raid is launching in week 1. Bungie knows this. They know we would have went in there and probably whooped up the raid pretty quickly. especially like high tier players that know how to build craft really, really fast. Those guys, when they get their hands on exotic class items and the full kit there of Prismatic, it's gonna be nasty. So yeah, lots of great things from that. Let's kind of circle back to the final shape itself. I don't want to give you narrative spoilers because the narrative is really important to all of us. I did have an interview though with the narrative team and one of the other developers, and you know, I'm trying to get access to that audio, and I think we may just upload that audio from that interview, and that way you can kind of get an idea of what I was trying to go for. But essentially in that interview, guys, what I was really driving home to in my questions was, are we going to get all the answers? Are we going to wrap up the loose ends lore wise? Now, let me just say, I definitely didn't get nearly as many answers as I had hoped. A lot of it came back to, hey, Cross, just play the campaign. You'll get more information. And we did get to play mission 1. We also got to play mission 5. I would say jumping around from mission to mission like that. We didn't get to play a bunch, but I think we also got to play a little bit of mission 7. But 1 was like the mission we played the most of. And I honestly was kind of like kept my blinders on because I didn't want to know too much going into it, because nothing jars me more than like jumping around in a campaign and things get kind of fragmented. So I like to kind of experience things in its chronological order because that's the best way to experience it. But I asked questions in that interview, and those questions included, are we going to learn more about the 3 factions, the factions that make up the Witness, right? What was the Witness's life like before the Witness? And all I got pretty much from that is just play the campaign and these things will be answered. Now, one question we did ask, and this was actually answered for us right on the spot, was about the red subclass. I asked, was the red subclass ever going to be a thing? And essentially what I asked was, are we going to get that 3rd subclass? I would assume it will be paracausal considering our other subclasses, but things are going to change, right? Obviously, after we defeat the Witness, how is that going to play a role? Why would we even need a 3rd subclass? That wasn't really answered on whether or not we're going to get a 3rd subclass. What was answered was that the red subclass that we covered last year was not real. I don't know what that was. They just said that there is no red subclass being worked on. They did not say that a new subclass is not being worked on, or that we will not get the 3rd darkness subclass. They just said from that screenshot that so many of us ran with last year on the red subclass, that is in fact not real. So yeah, just wanted to bring some clarification on that. I'm happy that they answered that for us though. Anyways, as far as like the final shape goes and the Pale Heart, this is an area that's going to be unlike any area we have had. And the reason why I bring that up is because the vibe of it is just creepier. And it's not necessarily like day and night cycle. I'm not going to get into like mechanics or whatever, but there are points when playing on the Pale Heart where, you know, things are clear and you can see the sky and it'll go from that to suddenly you can't even see what's right in front of you. Like and it almost reminds me like the dynamic weather system they included in Europa. It's similar to that, except for this is just like more daunting. You know, it's not just, oh, it's snow, we're in a blizzard. It's like, no, you're literally being enveloped by what you would equate to be darkness. And that plays into it mechanically. But that's kind of the experience on the Pale Heart. You'll go from this garden atmosphere to some of the most beautiful areas, and then you'll step off into what feels like hell. And I love that you can have both of those type of biomes in this one destination. Now, I did not get to experience the entire destination. We mainly only got to play like within the mission structure, and then we got to play one of the game modes on the Pale Heart, which is really cool. But within that new activity is when I got to really experience, you know, that effect where suddenly clear skies, you see your enemies all around you, and the next thing you know it, everything around you, you can't even see what's happening in front of you, and it feels like you're being wrapped in darkness. So that was really cool. Now, fighting the Dread. We said in the past that I would say the most annoying enemy type to face inside of Destiny is probably the Scorn. The Scorn, man, they just, the way they move, the fact that some of them just go in complete immunity by just like disappearing, then reappearing, and then they could just kill you from behind. Or the fact they have this like small circular shields that can somehow block literally everything is extremely annoying. The Dread are equally, if not more annoying. Subjugators, they're real, man. They're like on the level of Tormentors. Their presence is known. They're big. They literally take up the battlefield. Originally, when we were first shown the Subjugators, we thought they were just going to be like, you know, like the side little ad that comes in and buffs up other enemies. No, their presence is known. They are as potent as a Tormentor, especially considering they can lean in on Strand and lean in on Stasis. As far as the other Dread enemies, the ones like the Flying Bats, yes, they have that shout that can essentially like almost have like that suppression effect on you, which can really mess you up. The guys that got run around with, that's got like the double blades, and then when you kill them, they have like the worm thing come out of them that can explode. They're also really annoying. And understand, like, a lot of the gameplay that we're going against them at, it's like at level stuff. Maybe we're a little bit under, but at level stuff. These enemy types are annoying even at level. You can imagine how annoying they will be on GMs. Like Grandmaster Nightfall's playing against the Dread, it's going to be awful. And I'm here for it, man. I'm looking very much forward to facing those enemy types on the harder difficulties, especially like the legendary campaign. When we really get into that, I think that's going to be really fun. And we did get to go against some of those enemies in the legendary campaign, and that was a lot of fun. But in terms of like the most annoying enemy types to go against, I think they are now first place for me. Used to be Scorn, like Scorn and Taken were like right there neck and neck, but the Dread are at the top for me. Again, I really want to talk about some of the boss encounters we had, and I've got to go back through and check the notes and see what we could talk about this week. And I think maybe at some point this week we may have an entire video that's like, all right, listen, if you don't mind spoilers, you know, here's some more stuff, right? But some of the boss encounters, man, are incredible, especially when dealing with this new enemy type. But I love the nomenclature used for a lot of the Dread, you know, whether it's weavers, and that's essentially what they are. They're weaving strand. And so it's really cool that they dip into those names for all of those. And now that we know the Witness is literally using the light to create the Dread, really cool little lore detail on their creation, and of course why it is they're so annoying. Now, as far as other abilities we got to use, we did get to use the new aspects. We also got to use the new supers. Now, we're going to be doing deep dives on everything throughout this week, but if you've seen the new supers, so for the Titan, you've got the axes that you throw one at a time. You throw 3 of them in total, and then you can pick up those 3 axes. Now, your teammates can pick up those axes too. And inside of PvP, we went up against an entire team of Titans, and dude, once they got those supers going, they were so hard to beat, because not only were they using the supers to kill us, then they had 3 axes they can come pick up individually and run around and either kill us with the light melee attack or just outright just throw the axe at us and kill us. And so we were literally getting killed on spawn by these Titans. The Titan super is crazy, not just because of the damage it puts out, but because of its longevity, the ability to stretch the super beyond the super itself, right? Now, I did use the aspect, the unbreakable aspect, where you charge your grenade and then you do like the explosion. It's all right. I wasn't that blown away by it. I mean, it's okay. I think we need to mess around with it a bit more. We'll go back through the footage and look at it a bit more. I want to say there was one moment I did use Ursa Furiosa. And again, I know this is a game dev build, so things are subject to change, but for the most part, sandbox wise, everything here should be the sandbox we're going to be playing with in the final shape. So things like Cerberus and Colony, I got to play with those exotics that got their buffs, and yes, we'll be talking about that more this week. Now, other aspects we got to play with, the Solar Soul aspect on Warlock. That was really good. I enjoyed it. The super itself was also really good. I felt like I was running around with like a souped up Sunsinger from back in D1. And as what Bungie said, they of course wanted it to surpass that of Sunsinger back in D1. Obviously, many people think of Sunsinger as the self-res Warlock, and that's what a lot of people want. You're not getting that here. What you're getting is a number of abilities that are constantly up for you. And so you can just go there and just start, laying waste to an entire team or group of enemies. It has crazy tracking, especially the actual grenade effect, but you synergize it with your melee. So just think of it as all of your abilities having infinite uptime, and you're just literally emitting everything left and right. And it was funny because I was pairing that with Prismatic. So I would go from Transcendence, using Transcendence, buffing all my abilities, spitting everything out left and right, ability uptime at full max. Then right afterward, I would then jump to my super, which then contribute back to my Transcendence there. You see the loop here, guys, or you can go the other way. You could do, super first and then Transcendence second to contribute to more super. And so there's a lot of things here that is going to involve you having very high uptime with your abilities. And that was what I registered there with Warlocks, was like, with the new super, I had very high uptime. We also used it in PvP, and it was pretty nice in PvP. Now for Hunter has the new Ascension aspect where you troll the staff above your head. Okay, this is really good. I think a lot of people are discounting it. Yes, we used it with the new exotic, but we also used it with other things. Like I used it with Gerfalcons. And so every time, because of the Gerfalcon change, every time we got an ability kill, we would do with Falcons and Stylus Executioner. We would also go invisible, come out invisible, give a volatile rounds to avoid weapons. It was really, really nice. I really, really like that ability. Now, as far as the super goes, remember, you throw the knife, you teleport to it, you come out of it, and you're doing it looks like the same super animation from back in D1 when you could just do spin to win on yourself and kill everything in like AoE. I would argue and say 3 to 4 times larger than the D1 version of this. It's so large that when you throw that knife anywhere remotely close to an enemy, when you're coming out of it, it's so instant. You're just gonna kill whatever it is. I didn't necessarily do PvP gameplay of this, but I got to see or go up against hunters rocking this, and you just could not escape that ability. As far as PvE, I don't necessarily know if I'm gonna use this super for PvE. It seems to be more gauged at PvP for myself. But those were those new supers and aspects. So guys, that's pretty much it. I know this is a very general video, and so I mainly wanted to put this together and put this out as kind of like a warning, because past this point, we're going to be doing deep dives on everything. We have a number of things lined up. Exotic reviews for all the exotic armor pieces, the exotic weapons, the new supers, the new aspects, the complete look at exactly what you're looking at in your prismatic kits. All of these things are going to be rolling out throughout this week. If you do not want to see any of those things, I would honestly advise just not looking at anyone's YouTube channel, because it's not just going to be me making this content. There are a number of other content creators there that are also going to be posting up this content. So look away, but I hope you're okay with this video today being just more of a general overview. So far, I've been really impressed with what we got to see in the final shape. I'm excited about this expansion. I think it's going to be one of the best expansions. And, you know, I'm not getting into cutscenes or into narrative, but let me just say, narratively, there is a darker undertone than what we've experienced in the past. And I love that Bungie has leaned into that more. And let me also just say, Keith kills it as the follower. But that's it. So I'm going to say narratively, if we put out anything else that involves the narrative or any other missions, which we shouldn't be able to do anything other than mission 1. But if we put out anything else, I will honestly, we'll blur out the thumbnail. I'll just slap a big spoiler tag on it and we'll go from there. Again, my hope with this expansion is that everything comes full circle. We can now answer all the questions that we have, especially for my lore folks. I essentially want Vive and Mylan to be completely satisfied with this expansion from a lore perspective, because based on what we experienced in Lightfall, which really, it just didn't hit for us narratively. And so Final Shape is going to have to really pick it up from there. I would say from my knowledge of the lore and my experience with the few missions I got to play, it didn't necessarily answer questions. It brought more questions than answers. But again, we didn't play the entire campaign. We don't know exactly how everything's going to wrap up. I'm hoping that's going to be the case. We of course have episodes that are going to roll over after that. We have whatever we're going to be unlocking through the raid. So again, I want this one to be, a good conclusion to the Light and Darkness saga, but then also bring in all those other variables. What about the Vex? What about the 9? Is there anything going on with the wish that Aldrin or Crow unintentionally made? And so, what's the downside to that? And so these are the things that I hope get answered in the Final Shape campaign, and also in the episodes themselves, but more in the campaign. I don't necessarily want us to be in a situation where it's like, all right, here we go. We've got a ton of questions and let's just answer this throughout an entirety of a year. That sucked. I do believe that we are going to get those answers though, more answers rather than questions. And then after that, we'll have some lead ups into those other narrative points. So guys, thank you so much for tuning in for this video. Again, after this point, exotics, aspects, supers, prismatic, all that stuff is going to be rolling out. So be looking out for those. Brothers and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching. And as always,
slap that like button like your mama told you right.